Hi everyone, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a Dungeons & Dragons player that thinks he's Andrew Tate and takes things too far with another player's girlfriend. A story about a dungeon master that railroads a player, then blames said player for the outcome, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's get into some D&D horror story cringe. D&D player tries to be Andrew Tate by Reddit user Sensitive Issue 450. So me and a couple of friends decided to play D&D again after years apart after high school. And now, most of us have graduated college, and some even married. We had recently reconnected on Discord after a couple of my friends had met up in person and decided to, quote, get the group back together. This group included me and my best friend, still in college, but never lost contact. Another friend, who I had not seen since high school, who was now married and had a kid with his girlfriend from high school. The dungeon master, who I had not talked to in years either. And then that guy of the group, who nobody had seen since high school, but was part of our little group. We agreed to meet up for D&D at that guy's apartment. My friend would bring his wife, and I brought my girlfriend. When we got to that guy's apartment, he had a crappy car that he had painted up to look like what he probably thought was badass. When we came to the door, that guy had no shirt on and sunglasses, and had shaved his head. We were just like, okay. That guy also made a joke about us bringing chicks to a man's game. He ended up rolling a dragonborn barbarian with a harem that served his and his clients every sexual need. Seriously, why do all of these types of players want to have a harem in a D&D game? He even tried arguing with the DM about why he should be allowed to bring the harem on their journey with him, and DM tried pushing back, but that guy just got louder and more aggressive. And DM caved and let him bring his harem with him. And this was a mistake, as almost every woman we encountered, from barmaids to enemy combatants, he would offer them a position in his harem. He also kept hitting on my girlfriend's character, which made us both uncomfortable. I even confronted him about it after the session, and he just kind of gaslighted me about it by saying, "Stop being paranoid. No one is trying to steal your girl. Jealousy is very unattractive to women. It just makes you look like a beta." I told my girlfriend that if he made her uncomfortable, we can bounce, but she wanted to stay. She had made an Eldritch sorcerer girl that she really liked, and just thought that guy was a minor annoyance. The next incident came after my friend, playing an orc warlock, suggested that we spend the day shopping before we leave the city. That guy groaned and said, "Why the hell are we doing that?" My friend said, "We need some armor and weapons, bro. Plus, the city is rife with the BBEG spies. We might be able to learn something." That guy then said, "If he has spies, that's all the more reason to bounce. I don't need no effing armor anyway." My friend then started getting irritated and said, "Maybe you don't, but the rest of us do, so let us have a day please." And then that guy pouted the whole rest of the session and said we were wasting time, and said, "Turning D&D into some little girl dollhouse simulator," and then made fun of us shopping by trying to imitate a stereotypical teenage girl shopping as we went out to town. When we decided to stay in town the next session to investigate a mysterious spy that was hiding somewhere in town, he got bored and decided to murder our leads that could have helped us find the spy. When questioned, he claimed, "They were stalling us anyway. They probably would have just led us into a trap." Ironically, his shenanigans made us have to remain in the town longer to find the spy. But we did find him and moved on. The final straw, though, was the time he showed up drunk 3 sessions later. He dropped all pretense of plausible deniability, and while our party was fighting said mysterious spy, who turned out to be a weretiger with a couple of spells that the DM added, he ended up striking the final blow, and then got really loud and pompous, and unironically said that it was due to his, quote, alpha male source energy. What the heck? Then, after the session, he follows my girlfriend to the kitchen while we were having our post-session dinner. I didn't hear this, but found out later that he said, "We're gonna end up together. I just know it." She told him to back off, and he said, "You don't have a choice, baby. The universe has manifested it." And then he leaned in for the kiss, and she slapped him. So the universe manifested something else then. I didn't find out about this until we got home, and she told me that she didn't want to play anymore because she didn't feel comfortable in his house anymore. She told me the whole story, and then she had to try to convince me not to go back to his house to kick his ass. I then told the DM that we wouldn't be playing anymore, and DM then asked me if it was over something that guy did. I didn't give him the details, but told him that he was being creepy and making my girlfriend uncomfortable. DM seemed to get it on some level, and agreed to kick the guy without asking questions. We all then decided to go to DM's place for the campaign from now on, and eventually, my girlfriend did tell the party what happened, and we all kind of looked back on his behavior and agreed that we should have kicked that Andrew Tate Wannabe a long time ago. We didn't, because we were just caught up in the, quote, the gang getting back together. Sometimes you gotta accept that your old friends have changed. Holy jeez, why are some people like this? How did that guy expect that to go? Did he really think that he was going to lean in for a kiss and OP's girlfriend would go for it? Sure, as OP stated, that guy was drunk, but that is no reason to overstep a boundary like that. Good on DM for not questioning why OP and his girlfriend didn't want to play at that guy's place anymore, and just kicked that guy. Though, from his behavior in game, I can almost bet that DM was looking for a reason to give him the boot in the first place. At least, it sounds like they were able to continue the game at DM's place after this. Some people, man. Let's move on to the next post. RPG Horror Stories by Reddit user Excellent Sweet 1838. I have a twofer for you guys. Back in college, my then girlfriend, now wife, with whom I have literally been with since high school, wanted to get started playing D&D. I got some of the newest books, at the time 4th edition, but our mutual friends, 2 men named Presley and Hoggs for the sake of this story, said that 3.5 was way better. Presley DM'd for us and another friend. I made a human wizard, rolled really high for his age, and in the course of gameplay, I was called to make intelligence checks every time I cast a spell, which were finite in the system. I failed every check, and in the entire 2 hours I played, never managed to cast a single spell. Presley and Hoggs decided that my character was actually a doddering old man who only thought he was a wizard. They thought it was hilarious, and I wasn't taking it too seriously, and said that my guy Alzheimer'd his way into the woods, never to be seen again. And then I dipped, because my part-time job delivering pizzas texted to ask for help. I assumed that 3.5 had some weirder, more draconian rules, and that 4th edition was just a better product. Later, Hoggs DM'd for us. I made a cleric this time, and the same basic thing played out. My character had to make rolls for basically everything, to the point where he went insane because he couldn't tie his shoes, and he was interpreting a vastly different reality from any of the other players. Presley and Hoggs were our 2 closest friends, So again, I just assumed that 3.5 sucked, and that maybe they were kind of bad at DMing, a conclusion I reached after DMing some 4th edition games, but before finding my own copy of the 3.5 Player's Handbook. The truth came out a few months later when I learned that they were both talking mad crap about me to my girlfriend whenever I wasn't around, and using the 2 games of D&D as some kind of evidence that I actually didn't like her all that much, and it was obvious to everyone at the table. The plan was apparently to piss me off at the table, and then convince her that I was being angry because of her, and not because of their DMing. They never got past the part where they pissed me off though, because I kept naively assuming the system was terrible, and that they were actually my friends. I have no idea what their plan was if it had worked. Was one of them the wingman and the other one the competition? Was it some alliance that would fall apart once I was out of the picture? I'll never know. What kind of people does it take to come up with a harebrained scheme like that? I mean, even if Presley and Hoggs were able to get that sort of rise out of OP, how are they gonna convince OP's girlfriend that he was mad because of her? It would be obvious that it would be because of the game. The whole thing was just, well, stupid. Not much more to say on that one, aside from congrats to OP for marrying his high school sweetheart. But before we move on, if you're enjoying the stories, I ask that you consider clicking that like button. Also, if you aren't subscribed already, I hope I can earn your subscription today, as the channel is getting really close to 30K. If not for me, would you do it for Nipsey?
Yes. Liking and subscribing makes me happy. Like this toy.
Who could resist that face? So be sure to like and subscribe today, and make Nipsey happy. But with that said, let's get into some more stories. Dungeon Master railroads me, then blames me for the outcome. By Reddit user Luck Lizard. This was a number of years ago, during 3.5, but the message logs just got brought back up by an old friend who was there for the events, and it made me roll my eyes enough to post it here. I've been playing D&D for 21 years now, so at the time, I was fairly experienced and excited when a college buddy invited me to a game. They needed a caster of some kind and asked if I would be comfortable being either a druid or a warlock. I went druid as I was familiar with the class and hopped in. The dungeon master was pretty strict with me having to act anti-society as a druid, even saying that I couldn't hold coin for too long or I would lose my powers. This seemed odd to me, especially when he had my character handed the party's rewards for a mission, and then made it clear that if I did not dispose of them in lieu of letting them be used or sold, I would lose my powers. So we effectively got no reward as he made me throw it away, stating that druids hated money and society, and anything else, including handing it to the rest of the party, saying that would not have made sense, and that I would have lost my powers. Later, we needed to rescue a compatriot from a gladiatorial arena, and myself and our fighter saw slaves being kept and wanted to free them as well. We chose to sneak in, masquerading as servants, but after we got in, all of the slaves became immediately openly hostile and would scream as loud as they could while attacking us with deadly force if they saw us. And the dungeon master said that they could not be reasoned with or snuck past as they were too loyal to their masters. As we progress through the servant area, these were the main events. We hid inside of potato sacks. Servants happened to choose those exact 2 sacks, which were under several others and in the back of the larder, and became suspicious when they were heavy and began to stab at them with kitchen knives. When we tried to use non-lethal force to knock them out, we were told that they were so fragile that it killed them anyway, so we hid the bodies in the sacks and moved on to the kitchen. We hid behind a counter in the kitchen. A woman entered to clean and felt compelled to clean in our hiding spot behind a counter across the room from where she entered. She grabbed a knife just in case. We once again tried to knock her out when she inevitably discovered us, and were once again told it was lethal anyway, and that guards had heard the clamor and were coming to get us. We tossed the body in a hole in the wall. Then we were told that this was a stove, and we had just desecrated a body, as this society was weird about burial. We finally make it to the prison chambers. We free the slaves and our friend, but a monster emerges from behind what was apparently a fake wall, and we're told that it was summoned by the slaves, and that they were enslaved as punishment for being evil cultists or something, and now we had to run. So we escape, and we make it down a hill. We're told that we are safe from the guard, and that the slaves and monster had left. We go to rest, and as I go to purify water to get us some supplies, I am told instead that I am using poison water, and that I need to change my character's alignment from good to evil, and am now a dark druid because of my quote choices to murder and desecrate the bodies of people and free a monster. When I argued about this, the dungeon master said he quote thought I was an experienced player, and maybe should learn how D&D works. He then got into my Skype DMs and started asking me to come back the next week, and he'd revert the changes for me if I wanted, but that I would need to, quote, learn to accept consequences, and take his word as law, because in D&D, it's all about the DM. And so I blocked him everywhere. I just now got a message about this from the friend who originally invited me, because apparently said DM now uses this story as an example of why he doesn't like having, quote, the alphabet mafia at his table, because they're too sensitive for real D&D, and even name-dropped me, which is funny, as I mostly run games with fairly dark tones. I just run actual D&D instead of making up nonsense to mess with the player characters. Now, that is some BS right there. First, telling a player that they can't hold loot because of a character trait that OP never agreed to, and even making it so that OP can't just give loot to the rest of the party is really stupid. Then, to basically railroad them with that whole mission, and having NPC do things that don't make sense in order to locate the players. Then, having it so that the players can't do non-lethal damage is also BS. But the thing that gets me most is the DM saying that OP needed to change his alignment due to the things that the DM basically forced OP into, and then saying to OP that D&D is all about the dungeon master. That has to be the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard a DM saying. D&D is about everyone at the table, making a story together. This DM just had some sort of superiority complex. And then, to use this story and OP as an example to not have anyone that would be considered LGBT is really stupid. Anyway, at least it sounds like OP has since played plenty of other games since this one. Let's move on. That time I was killed by a healing item. By Reddit user Riel1HP. This happened way back in the day. I was probably only 16 or 17. My group was the DM, me, and one other player. We were playing 3.5, and the rules of that system are a bit foggy now. I'm not sure whether this was a homebrew or the actual rules, but either way, we were playing with the rules that if you were down, you lost a hit point every round due to bleeding, and if you hit -10, you died. My character went down by being struck in the throat, so he ruled that I was losing 3 hit points each round. When combat ended, The other player tried to save me by putting a handful of Goodberries in my mouth. DM had him roll an intelligence check. I will be on my deathbed remembering that he rolled a 4. That 4 is seared into my brain, as is the exact dialogue that followed. DM went, "Yeah, looks fine," and went about describing the loot he was getting. After about a minute, he said, "Oh, by the way, OP, you're dead." Obviously, I was surprised and went, "What? Why?" Very calmly, he explained, "He didn't roll well enough to know that you couldn't swallow, so you choked to death." This remains the only time in my nearly 3 decades of playing D&D that I have rage quit a table. Yeah, I'd be a bit peeved if that happened to my character in a game. I understand that in real life, trying to force food into someone that is unconscious isn't something you should do. But OP and his friends were playing a fantasy game about slaying dragons. And if you can make someone unconscious drink a healing potion, you should be able to do so with Goodberries as well. Well, at least that is my opinion. What do you all think? Let's move on to the next one. Player initiates player versus player in Session 1 against a new player. By Reddit user DietTiny9245. This happened several years ago in my first game as a player. I had DM'd a couple of times before, but this was my first time playing with a new group I had met at a local gaming club. Most players at the table were fine, and the Dungeon Master was, and is, a good friend of mine. But there was one player who ruined my first playing experience. The red flags were there in Session 0. I was playing a fighter / Pact of the Blade warlock. The story being, he was a soldier who had picked up a possessed weapon and entered a pact by accident. I was told by the problem player, "You should play Warlock Paladin, it's just better," in Session 0. When I refused, I was told, "Fine, but you better be willing to stand back and just spam Eldritch Blast, because that's really all you're good for." The first session begins, and aside from some cringe comments, I was having a good time being on the other side of the DM screen. We get to a dungeon, and after fighting some monsters, find a chalice brimming with dark energy. The DM tells me my possessed weapon is commanding my character to drink from the chalice, as my character can be compelled by the weapon from time to time as part of the pact. I say my character moves to drink from the chalice, but am interrupted by the problem player, saying, "I'd like to start blade singing and attack him so he can't drink from the chalice." I should point out, he was playing a blade singer wizard, who, even at level 3, had some bonkers stats. I think he was sitting at like AC 21 while blade singing, with multiple attacks and booming blade. Needless to say, my casual character, built for story over dice rolls, gets absolutely crushed. Afterwards, there's kind of an awkward pause before the DM ends the session, and we never played again. The silver lining is that I have DM'd many times since, and am much more aware of the red flags of a problem player. I also heavily discourage PvP unless there is a legitimate reason, and other avenues of resolution have been explored. Yeah, that Blade Singer player could have tried other things to try and stop OP's character from drinking from the chalice, instead of resorting to PvP right off the bat. But he probably did it, mainly because OP didn't listen to his advice during character creation, and took that as a slight against him personally. Plus, in this situation, the DM could have always stepped in and said no PvP. But in the end, it doesn't really sound like it mattered much, as that campaign ended with that session. And at least OP is looking on the bright side, and is using this experience to recognize possible red flags with new players. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.